which increases the costs. The insurance companies, I mean, what drives these prices up is just a very complicated system, and people feel that they're being taken advantage of, either by their insurance companies or by the medical field. But I don't think that people don't feel that doctors are deserving of making a high wage. If they're getting a service from them, I think
some people think that the more their doctor charges, the better doctor he is.
Yeah.
Oh, no. That's again goes to perception. But so, when you start to break it out, because all the things, Andy, you were just talking about are actually not doctor fees.
Right.
So I think that by and large, whenever you talk to most people, they believe that their doctor, if he's a good doctor, and you end up with a personal relationship with your doctor in many cases, especially your PCP.
Right.
You believe that they are deserving, and we're okay with paying for a good doctor.
They deserve a fair wage, just like anybody else. But when I see that they charged $400 to my insurance company for a 15-minute visit, I get a little what? It just makes me wonder. Of course, they're not getting $400 from my insurance company. No, they're not getting that much. It makes me wonder if they charge so much just so they can get a smaller fee.
Well, I was actually...
I think it's a used car syndrome.
I actually got to eavesdrop on a conversation between a person who was selling medical equipment and a doctor when I was on a flight one time. And a lot of this, from what I gather, a lot of these costs have to do with paying for that equipment. So what they do is they know how much they have to charge. It's kind of like buying a house. When you go to the bank to get your conventional loan for your house, it's already known how much. It's about distribution. How are we going to charge this much? It's coming from that end of it. We need to make this much money.
Now you factored in with the doctors is that not only are you paying for the doctor's education, his intelligence quota, but the fact that if you go to a doctor and all he's got in his office is tongue depressors,
right? Right.
But if his office is equipped and he's got all these gadgets hanging on the wall and assistants and all the services and all these people have to be paid, and as Democrats we want those folks paid a fair living wage.
And it's not all going to be itemized on your bill that way.
It's not going to be, but he's as a bottom line, he's got to factor in all this stuff. Plus he's got to figure in the fact that he's he'd serviced an indigent person at the hospital.
That's right.
And that was his time, his material, and he's going to bill the hospital. The hospital's not going to pay the bill, but he's going to, have to factor that in as well. So I think that by and large, my feeling from just this group, and the very small polling group, but I hope the listeners out there would think of it this way and go, yeah, I think my doctor's probably worth that.
Yeah. So is your question, do we want a different system?
No, I think what I'm going toward is where is the inadequacy in the system? Where is it breaking down? Andy, you were talking about drugs. Okay, and it is a fact that in Canada you can buy the same medicine by the same pharmaceutical company cheaper. In Mexico you can buy the same. George Bush, the Bush, he made a big issue out of that because you can't go buy drugs in Canada, you can't go buy drugs in Mexico because those drugs do not meet the testing standards.
Right.
But they came from...
I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't think Pfizer says this is a Mexican pill, so we don't have to test it as well.
Many of these drugs came from the U.S. originally, and they had to meet our standards before they went there.
Mark, we were talking earlier and making a lot of jokes about certain commercials for prescription medication. But seriously, when pharmaceutical companies were given the green light to advertise their products on TV, that was the number one initial driving force behind why we have to pay so much for prescription drugs.
Yeah, we just here a week and a half ago, somebody was pointing out a full-page ad in the Houston Chronicle for Cialis. A full-page ad.
Right.
Now, that advertising. But what this really, I think the bigger issue.
Look at any magazine,
saying,
and
right.
you've got 20 different cholesterol medications.
Right.
We all seen them.
Right. Well, the advertising is a big part of it, but the reality is what drives all of this are the lobbyists up in Washington.
Oh, yeah.
Because whether it's good for us or it's bad for us, it's going to be good for them. Because the lobbyists are going to make sure that any legislation that comes down that restricts, and that's what a lot of the battle with the Affordable Care Act has been, is these conflicting interests. What's good for the country versus what's good for these particular groups that have these lobbyists, because that is what's driving legislation.
Okay, let's factor that in. A lobbyist is going to go to Mary sitting in Congress, and I'm going to try to convince Mary to support a piece of legislation that is going to be inevitably good for my company. And so, how am I going to do that? But we all know that's done with money.
Okay.
Now, if they give hundreds of thousands of dollars to push a piece of legislation, in some cases millions of dollars to push a piece of legislation, are these guys in the business of not making money? Or is that going to be factored into the cost of doing business and inevitably the cost of the medicine or the equipment or the service that I'm going to receive?
That's right, because it's overhead.
So let's put lobbying as a bad guy.
Well, they say that lobbying has its place, but I think lobbying has definitely gotten out of control, because what it has accomplished is it's accomplished our politicians, who are now the majority, auctioned off to the highest bidder. When the lobbyists come in and they step in and they go to these individuals, and they want their interests represented, that's not necessarily in the best interest of the public in general. And then that eliminates our voice. We have no voice when that happens, because we're not up there. Number one, we're not aware of what they're doing, which is part of being an educated voter, which is why we're here, is trying to get people to think about what's actually happening that's driving this legislation. And when you're up against a group, especially a group that has come together specifically to address legislation, like we've seen with ALEC, for instance, their whole motive behind what they're doing is to steer legislation so it works for the benefit of a few, as opposed
Could you please explain a little bit about ALEC and where that comes from?
Well, it's ALEC is a group. It's supposed to be, or it was claimed to be, bipartisan. But when you look at the membership rolls of it, our governor, it's GOP legislator after GOP legislature. You can go down the list. The majority of people that are involved in ALEC are Republican. That's the bottom line. That's just the reality of it. Go into their membership list. And it's been in existence, my understanding, and I'm not the expert here, but it's my understanding it's been in existence since the 70s.
Okay, and ALEC is the American Legislative Exchange Council. I know that two huge contributors, in fact, many people say the core of ALEC is the Koch brothers.
That's right.
And the Koch brothers actually own the largest privately held businesses in the world. They're not traded on the stock exchange, and so they play by a different set of rules, but they have an enormous amount of money that they pump into the legislation system, not just at the federal level, but at the state level. And you guys are aware that you talk to folks from other states and many people in Austin, and Austin, or our legislation in Austin, is known as a cash and carry state. I mean, if you've got the money, you can buy legislation in Austin. And that disturbs me.
It should disturb every citizen of the state of Texas.
What brought them onto the radar screen, they're starting to make it out into the mainstream. And it's been long in coming because it's been flying under the radar for a very long time, and now they've gotten themselves organized to where they have it appears that they have a very specific playbook. And what brought it home for me was, and what really started me getting involved in that we have to do something, is the Wisconsin situation. When Scott Walker went and when that legislation started, and I started going after teachers, started going after and claiming it was for financial reasons to save the state, that he was union busting, and you're watching 80,000 people screaming in the streets. And this man is acting like his hearing aid's off. Mm-hmm. And so as I'm watching this go down, I'm thinking to myself, there's something behind this. This isn't just this man thinking he's doing the right thing. There's something behind this. And as it evolved...
You're right.
Oh, yeah. And as it evolved, and then we started seeing the legislation go in Idaho, we started seeing it's similar, almost verbatim, and in some cases verbatim, legislation in Florida, Arizona, Texas. All these different states are starting to carry all this legislation, and then some lady in Florida very foolishly left ALEC, the alliance, on the bottom of her bill when she put it into the legislation. And then she overlooked it. And yes, and so then everybody's going, well, wait a minute, who's this? So more and more you see on Facebook, and that's why Facebook has brought a whole different world to us, because now people are starting to hear who ALEC is. We didn't for so long, but they've already formulated their playbook, and they've already played out several pages in it before we even saw what was going on. And now we're becoming where ALEC Exposed is a really good web page that puts a lot of good information out there. So if you don't know who ALEC is, you need to start doing your research. You need to start looking, and you can find quite a bit of information right there on Facebook.
In July 2011, the Center for Media and Democracy unveiled that over 800 model bills and resolutions were secretly voted on by corporations and politicians through the American Legislative Exchange Council. These bills reveal corporate collaboration reshaping our democracy. So we're looking at not just, their handprint on a piece of legislation. They have an orchestrated plan, and that they're pushing over 800 pieces of legislation and resolutions across the country, some of them at the federal level, some of them at state levels, because some states are targeted, they're softer states for them to work in. Texas is actually one of those states.
Yes, we're very cooperative with them on this level. On our issue having to do with Unite Women, the Pence Amendment, they attempted to push the Pence Amendment through on the state level, which was the beginning of undermining the abortion issue for Planned Parenthood. That's where it evolved from, and it failed. When it got to the Senate, it failed. Immediately, that was in 2011. After the big onslaught in 2010, we had the switch over, and that's kind of when it all started rolling, okay? Because then they had more power. Then they had the House, which they didn't have before. But when it failed in the Senate, then it went from there and started spreading through about 23 states that were all Republican-led legislatures. And they just started knocking it down, one state after another. So part of the legislation came here to Texas, Tennessee, Idaho, Arizona, Ohio, Virginia, all these states that have GOP-led legislatures started knocking out that playbook, and just page by page. Yeah. It's an ideology issue. Not only has it to do with the financial aspects, it's also an ideology, which is what you find in the Planned Parenthood. Because for a while it took me a while to understand. With Ty, I'm thinking, why are they getting involved in these social issues and not staying focused on their economic issues? Mm-hmm. But the Koch brothers are fundamentalists. Okay, again, I mean, and they do a lot of good.
Capitalists.
That's the sad thing. Yeah.